Prynhawn da i chi gyd, gobeithio eich bydd gyd yn cadw'n iawn, a diolch yn fawr iawn i chi am ymuno gyda ni ar gyfer ein gwem yna, i'ch cefnogi i baratoi i gyflwyno'r cymhwyster Lefel 3 mewn Plastro a Leinio Sych. Good afternoon to you all, hope you're keeping well, and thank you very much for joining us for preparing to deliver the Level 3 qualification in Plastering and Dry Lining. Rydym dal yn gweithio o adre, felly ymddiheuriadau ymlaen llaw am unrhyw sŵn yn y cefndir ac unrhyw oedi yn y sleidiau. We are all still working from home, therefore I apologise in advance for any background noise and any delay in the slides. Fe fyddwch yn derbyn copi o'r pwynt pŵer a recordiad o'r webinar yn ogystal â thysysgrif i gadarnhau eich presenoldeb ar ôl y webinar. Fe gallwch ddod o hyd i bob recordiad o'n gwebinarau blaenorol ar ein gwefan Sgiliau i Gymru. Gallwch hefyd gofrestru ar gyfer ein gwebinarau sydd i ddod ar y wefan. You will receive an email with a copy of the PowerPoint, the recording of this webinar, and also a certificate of attendance after this webinar. You can access the recordings to all previous webinars and register for upcoming webinars on our Skills for Wales website. Fe fyddwch yn derbyn e-bost gyda linc i'n harolwg. Byddem yn ddiolchgar iawn pydach yn cymeryd yr amser i lenwi ein harolwg, gan bod eich adborth yn berffaith iawn i ni. You will receive an email with a link to a survey. We would be very grateful if you could take the time to fill in this survey, as your feedback is very valuable to us. Felly dyma beth byddwn ni'n trafod heddi. So this is what we will be going over this afternoon. Fe fyddwn yn sôn pam mae'r trawsnewid yma wedi digwydd. Byddwn yn edrych ar gynnwys y gynhwyster Lefel 3 gan edrych yn benodol ar Plastro a Leinio Sych. Yna fe fyddwn yn edrych ar gynnwys yr strwythur yr unedau ac hefyd yn rhoi crynodeb o'r asesiad. Fe fyddwn yn dangos canllaw cadarnhad y cyflogwr i chi, ac yna yn edrych ar yr adnoddau dysgu sydd ar gael. Ac yna yn mynd trwy y cymau nesaf gyda chi. Ac ar y diwedd, fydd yna gyfle i chi ofyn unrhyw gwestiynau i ni. Plis manteisiwch ar y cyfle yma gan roi eich cwestiynau yn y tab cwestiynau sydd ar y llaw dde o'ch sgrin yn ystod y cyflwyniad. Therefore, we'll be looking at why the transformation of these qualifications have happened. We will look at the content of the Level 3 qualification, looking specifically at plastering and dry lining. We will look at the structure of the units and give a summary of the assessments. We will also look at the employee confirmation guide, and then we will show you the learning resources that are available for you before moving on to discuss the next steps with you. And then at the end, there will be an opportunity for you to ask us any questions. Please type in any questions that you may have in the questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen during the presentation. Felly dyma chi eich cyflwynwyr heddi. Therefore, here are your presenters today. We have David Pye, who's the Technical Advisor for BSc at City and Guilds. Also have Jason Howe, who's the Technical Advisor for Construction at City and Guilds. Ian Roberts, who's also a Technical Advisor for Construction at City and Guilds. And myself, Angharad Lloyd-Bynon. I'm the Policy Stakeholder and Partnerships Manager at City and Guilds. Felly pam y trawsnewid yma? So why the transformation? So back in February 2018, Qualifications Wales published the Building the Future report, which was a sector review of the qualifications and the qualification system in construction and the built environment in Wales. Some of Qualifications Wales' outline findings were that there was inconsistent assessment practice, some areas of learning not effectively assessed, learners needed to deal with a range of tasks and able to problem solve, and the qualifications weren't meeting the skills needs of Wales. There was also a need to reduce the complexity of the system and a need to improve coherence with clear pathways, and therefore progression routes needed to be clear through the framework and onto work or higher education. Therefore, City and Guilds and EAL are two awarding bodies who have come together to collaborate on the development of a suite of construction and building services engineering qualifications for Wales. On this next slide, it shows the type of questions that you may have with regards to this Level 3 qualification. As I mentioned earlier, you will be receiving a copy of this presentation if I won't be going through this slide. On the next slide, it shows you a possible learner journey with the different options for a learner. Therefore, one example there would be a learner would do a broad Level 1, then move on to do foundation, qualification, then a progression, and then an apprenticeship, or the option for a learner to go straight on to an apprenticeship with the core built in. Hoffwn nawr eich trosglwyddo i Jason, a fydd yn eich tywysg trwy y sleidiau nesaf. I would now like to pass you over to Jason, who will take you through the next few slides. Diolch.
Thank you, Anne Howard, and good afternoon, everybody. Just before we get started, just to make everybody aware that all of the qualification handbooks and the assessment packs are on the Skills for Wales website, and really encourage everybody to pay a visit to the website, navigate the relevant qualification, and access all of the support documents. That will be really helpful for you moving forward. Next slide, please, Ian. So a bit of a recap and a quick move looking forward. So these are the new suites of qualifications that are available now in Wales for construction. So to the left there, we have the foundation and core, and that consists of 10 trades altogether, including 2 from BSc. Next to that, we have the progression, which consists of 9 trades within construction, and then finally at the end we have the construction level 3 qualifications, which are aligned to the apprenticeships. And for the purpose of this, we're just showcasing and highlighting the dry lining and fixing at level 3 and the solid plastering. Next slide, please, Ian. Thank you. So just to have a quick look at the rules of combination. So as we know, as you may know, there are 6 common core units, and that's applicable across all of the different level 3 qualifications, and they are the same units. And then they are accompanied and followed with 1 trade-specific pathway. So for the purpose of this, we are just going to look at solid plastering. And within the solid plastering qualification, there is 7 units attached. Within the assessment methods and the 3 assessment methods that's available within this qualification, learners have to obviously achieve at least a pass grade or higher in order to successfully achieve across the whole level 3 qualification. Just to be mindful of the JLH as well, there's 1,094 hours attached to the JLH, and that it does include 96 hours for assessment, which is conducted in both the training providers' facilities and within the employer industry setting. Thank you, Ian. And just quickly touching on the dry lining, we have the 6 same common core units as listed, 301 to 306. For this, we obviously have the dry lining pathway, and within that qualification, there are 4 specific units. And similarly, again, the learners have to achieve a pass grade or higher in the 3 set assessment methods to be successful in this qualification. Within this one, it's 714 guided learning hours with 86 hours for assessment. And again, similarly with the solid plastering, learners can conduct this in both the training providers' facilities and within industry. Next slide, please, Ian. So these are just a little bit more detail on the common core units within this qualification. So again, units 301 to 306, and we have the unit titles and the aligned JLH that goes with those accordingly. So if we were to just quickly look at one of those units, or if you were to have a look in the qualification handbook and explore, if we were to pick unit 302, which is working in construction sector in Wales, there are 2 learning outcomes aligned with that, and learning outcome 1 is understanding the built environment in Wales, and learning outcome 2 would be understand how to work effectively with others. And we're going to look a little bit more detail in a couple of examples of the qualification handbook moving forward. Next slide, please, Ian. These are the aligned trade units within solid plastering. So again, you have the unit numbers, the set unit title, and the bespoke GLH that is aligned to that unit. And the GLH is aligned in line with the unit content, including the learning outcomes and the assessment criteria. Next slide, please, Ian. For dry lining, we have the 4 set units that we mentioned earlier. And again, we have the unit number, the title, and the total GLH, again, that are aligned to those set units. And at the bottom of each table, you'll see the assessment GLH and then the combination or total GLH for that qualification as well. Next slide, please, Ian. So we're going to have a look in a little bit more detail on what the qualification handbook looks like. Next one, please. So as mentioned earlier, you can get this information straight out of the qualification handbooks that are on the Skills for Wales website. So the information we provided aims to give an overview of how the unit content is structured and how the areas of content relate to each other, as well as qualification, delivery and assessment. If you are familiar with City and Guilds qualifications, you'll see soon that the layout follows a well standardized appearance that we are used to within our qualifications, with some new and hopefully useful additions for you. So just some brief cap on this for those that aren't familiar. Learning outcomes are grouped together chunks of practical skill and knowledge and are presented as the result of a learning process, a teaching and learning process. And it's what a learner should understand and be able to do following having that training and that teaching and learning and formative assessment. Next, you have the assessment criteria. And this just breaks down the learning outcome into smaller areas to be covered. And these are the criteria that will be assessed in connection with that learning outcome. And then finally, we have the range. And this contains information on the breadth required for the specific assessment criterion. We have to remember, though, that the range isn't exhaustive. So if there's anything applicable to you guys regionally or any additions that you would like to include in your teaching, then by all means, and that is certainly encouraged. And all elements really of the range should be covered for our learners to make sure that they're getting that full breadth of content delivery. Next slide, please. So this is just a bit, so we're going to have a look at some structures of how the qualification handbooks are. So we're going to look at one of the core units and one of the trade units, and you'll see the similarities. So within the trade, or within any of the units, you have a unit number and title, as laid on the screen at the top, followed by the JLH, and for the purpose of this unit, it is 40 JLH. Then you have a brief description of what the unit is about, and you could use that to inform learners of the next unit they're going to be working on, or if you wanted to use it as a bit of course information. Following that, we have the learning outcomes, and these the number of learning outcomes listed within each unit basically depend on the content of the unit and what's required. Next slide, please. So just to look in a little bit more detail, so we're kind of following on from the slide previous, you've still got the learning outcome as shown on the screen, and then that's followed by the criteria and then the range. And again, just emphasize that the range isn't exhaustive, and you can add additions to that, applicable to your teaching and learning. The new part is the delivery outcome. And what this showcases is the depth of content basically that has to be delivered. And within this, hopefully you'll be able to utilize all of that information that's given in there to basically, plan your delivery of teaching and learning to your learners. Next slide, please. Just to look at one of the trade units, you'll again hopefully be able to identify the similarities similar to that of one of the core units. So you've got your unit number and title, the GLH, the brief description, and the learning outcomes accordingly. Next slide, please. And again, just to showcase that the learning outcome is followed by the criteria and range, and then comes that delivery outcome, which shows the depth of content that should be delivered. And we just wanted to highlight this one because it's laid out slightly different with bullet points. So it pinpoints certain things that should be covered as part of the delivery. Next slide, please. I'm now going to hand you over to my colleague Ian, who's going to take you through the next round of slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will commence by going through the summary of assessments moving through. Plastering and dry lining level 3 qualifications is assessed using 3 methods of assessments. The on-screen assessment, which is multiple choice questions, externally set and externally marked with an overall weighting of 20%. You will see that this will include test 1 and test 2, which I will come back to you when we go into greater depth moving forward. The practical project, that's covering the trade area, that they are working towards. This is carried out within industry, set in agreement with the employer, and assessed by assessor employed by the training provider. This will then be externally quality assured and has an overall weighting of 60%. The initial two methods of assessment, you will already notice, is very similar to what we have for the foundation and progression qualifications. The slight differences now, of course, is the professional discussion. The professional discussion is one externally set and externally marked by a trade-specific member of the awarding organisation and has an overall weighting of 20%. This is actually taken away from the guided discussion that will be carried out, so it's the same as, but now more in greater detail as it now becomes the professional discussion, moving away from the guided element as what you've know about at this moment in time for the foundation and the progression. We will be going in greater depth through each method of assessment in the coming slides. But before we do move on, I would like to reinforce we have an assessment pack detailing the requirements of the assessments, which can be downloaded from the Skills for Wales website. Excuse me. Within this slide, I would like to go through in more depth each method of assessment. The on-screen assessment contains two tests, Test 1 and Test 2, and can be taken at any stage in the assessment process. Although this is on demand and completed at any time, it is advisable to complete prior to the professional discussion. Test 1 contains 45 questions, and the learner will have 70 minutes to complete. And they may have already been completed during their second year, or a learner who may have completed their progression qualification will have achieved, as this is the same test. Test 2 is completed in their final year and has 44 questions and again a timing of 70 minutes for the learner to complete this method of assessment. The practical project is made up of 3 elements, very similar to what we have in the foundation and progression qualifications, which starts with the planning, the performing, and evaluating are the 3 elements. The difference being is that the project is carried out in the realistic working environment. They can select from a number of tasks that are outlined within the assessment pack and cannot exceed any more than 4 work-based tasks in total. The assessor employed by the training provider will carry out live assessment visits, which will include observing live performance of the performing of the different tasks at different stages and will include a minimum of 3 visits. The professional discussion will be carried out by a member of the awarding organisation and will be occupationally competent. Excuse me. This will be carried out in a one-time sitting and will either be virtual or face-to-face. The professional discussion will last no more than 40 minutes and will be graded pass to distinction. The learner will need to demonstrate their knowledge, understanding, and performance from the occupational standards relevant to their trade. They will also be required to reflect on the practical project they have completed within their discussion. The professional discussion can only take place once the learner has completed their project and the employer confirmation guide, which we will go through shortly. Online assessments will contain engaging multiple choice question types and styles and are all online with results received immediately after the assessment. When a learner has successfully achieved the progression qualification in their chosen route, then they are exempt from test 1. And if they haven't, then they have to sit and achieve test 1, because the test 1 is exactly the same as what the learner working towards a progression qualification will have to achieve. The outcome, therefore, is that if the learner has not taken the progression qualification, then they have to sit and achieve both tests, test 1 and test 2. Here you can see on the right of the slide, assessment information for test 2, which states 44 questions, and they require a minimum of 30 correct responses to attain a pass. And this document information can be located within the assessment pack, and it's the same for test 1 as well. That is also located in the assessment pack, which is on the Skills for Wales website. So please, if you do have the opportunity, have a look at it and please familiarise yourself with the relevant document. We are now going to cover in more detail the practical project. The learner will have 12 hours to complete all of their planning. And this, as we've already mentioned, may include up to 4 tasks. Then they have 50 hours to complete to performing and 12 hours to complete the evaluation of the tasks that they have been set and that they have included within their project. A gentle reminder that the project cannot include any more of the 4 work-based tasks. The various tasks are outlined within the assessment pack. And as previous, further information can be located on the website. So please don't hesitate to try and locate. If you can't locate, then please drop us an email and we'll help support you that way. With regards to the professional discussion, here you can see a brief overview of the content and timings. The learner will have to reflect on the units we have identified, along with the learner's reflection on the practical project. This should help you in supporting the learner in being prepared to meet the external assessor. The project documentation can be available during the professional discussion to help the learner make the appropriate references that they may require. And as you can see, the discussion will have to be recorded and yet captured in secure GDPR compliant way. And before we move on, just to reinforce once again that the professional discussion will be conducted by a competent external assessor from a member of the regulatory body. I should say awarding organisation. We are all aware that there is no NVQ within the level 3 qualification. Learners will still have to gain the relevant knowledge and skills that we are aware of. Them skills and knowledge within industry to carry out and fulfil their role within the construction industry. And as we can see here, moving forward, the on-screen assessment, there are no limits to the number of times a learner may resit the assessment. But when resitting, learners can achieve the full range of marks and grades that is available. And like we've mentioned earlier, the assessment is available and is on screen and on demand. The practical project we've gone through, so people are aware of that. But what we've got to be aware of is, if any criteria are failed along the way, learners must resit to meet the assessment requirements. And on occasions, if a complete majority of the performing, then a new task must be set, with the new task planning and assessment plan documents having to be completed. Again, if any of the above criteria, which falls within the tolerances that's highlighted within the assessment pack, then they can resit and rework over a period of time to address the knowledge and skill gaps that's identified. When resitting the professional discussion, the centre will be informed, and then the learner must resit the full professional discussion. And that professional discussion then will have to be rebooked via wall garden to be able to move forward. The employer confirmation is part of the learner journey and will help strengthen the relationships between employers, centres and the learners. This is only part of the journey, and we'll go into greater detail and in depth on this in a few slides further on. But what we've got to make sure is that the employee confirmation must be completed before the point of booking the professional discussions. This will also help the learner support the learner in applying for their relevant CSCS card. Without this being completed, the learner would not be able to successfully apply for their card. The overall qualification will be graded pass, merit and distinction. And provisional grades for the practical project will undergo internal and external quality assurance. And the final grading will be issued by City and Guilds for construction. And just to touch on the resit and resubmissions of any work, when a learner is required to resit or resubmit any of the assessments, appropriate feedback and support must be provided to enable the learner to do so within an appropriate time frame. But again, the guidance on the resit and resubmissions can be found in the assessment pack. And now I'd like to go a little bit deeper now into the employer confirmation guide to go through. But first of all, before I start, I'd just like to say a thank you to the people and all stakeholders for their valuable contribution and feedback we have received, and that has helped the consortium in shaping what I'm about to present. Because without your contribution, we wouldn't be where we are today. Employer confirmation is part of the learner journey, and like I've mentioned, will help strengthen the relationships between employers, centres and the learner. This is only part of the learner journey, and the process will enhance the employer role in the delivery of the new apprenticeship qualifications in the construction and built environment sector. As we are aware, the learner will spend a considerable amount of their time in the realistic working environment. And the purpose of the confirmation sign-off is to capture the activities and provide stakeholders, including trade bodies, confidence that the learner is occupationally proficient and has covered the full range of the relevant standards to allow the learner to progress to the final part of their assessment process, which is the professional discussion. Although there is no MVQ within the new apprenticeship model, a learner will still provide a range of evidence that allows the centre to check the employer confirmatory sign-off is valid. Upon successful completion of the robust assessment process, and the confirmatory sign-off, the learner will then be in a position to attain the relevant skills card. We are aware that the employer confirmation process is new and may raise a few concerns. The consortium, however, will provide centres and employers with instructions and the requirements for completing this process, and it is retained within the employer confirmation guide, which will be further communicated at our centre and employer events. And like I've mentioned, this will be located and is located on the Skills for Wales website under the relevant qualification. Here we can see how, working collaboratively, we can support the learner along their journey that they will require to move forward and progress to their final assessment, the professional discussion. And as you can see, by working together, employers and centres will provide opportunities that will allow the learner to gain valuable industrial experience and complete the activities outlined within the employer confirmation guide. Whether it be 1, 2 or 3 employers, they will work with the learners throughout their apprenticeship. Hence the reasons why we have made provision on the various forms contained within the employer confirmation guide for more than one employer to work on the relevant documents. Work-based learning providers and centres will work with employers to guide and support to ensure the occupational competency statement log is being completed correctly. And as you can see, the pieces start to come together, and this is through working collaboratively together to ensure that learner journey does run smoothly. This process is to ensure the learner is prepared for that final assessment. And as you can imagine, this hasn't been a smooth journey, as change is always and sometimes very difficult to accept. We have engaged with a considerable number of stakeholders, including micro businesses, medium to large contractors, and federations, including colleges and private training providers, to help develop and enhance this documentation. Within this slide, you can see a front page, what the contents is, and a section that is contained within the employer confirmation guide. Whether it be 1, 2 or 3 employers, they will work with the learners throughout their apprenticeship. The employer confirmation guide will be trade specific, and as I've mentioned earlier, can be located now on the Skills for Wales website. So please, if you've got an opportunity, locate it and then go through it. And any questions you may have, don't hesitate to forward them on to us. The document will be in a writable PDF and can be completed either electronically or hard copy. The employer confirmation is the responsibility of the employer and learner working collaboratively with the learning provider. Although not part of the qualification, this has to be completed prior to the learner moving forward to complete their final assessment, the professional discussion. Without this being completed, the learner will not be in a position to progress onto that professional discussion. We will be holding further webinars focusing on the employer confirmation guide in the very near future. So please look out for the dates and especially on how to register onto these webinars. And just to complete this section, we will also be holding webinars with employers at a time that will suit them, not that will suit us, but to suit their times and their needs. As we are all aware, they work on social hours the best of time. So we have also got to make sure we are available to be able to do that, and we will do so. So thank you for now, and I would now like to pass you on to David, who will take you through the next items on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to this, the latest of our webinars that we've been running. I have frantically been trying to answer some questions as we're on the go. It can be difficult sometimes, so apologies if they seem abrupt. It's just a way of me trying to get the answer out as quickly as I possibly can, working through them all. We will have time at the end to go through some more of those questions, so please keep those coming, and if we haven't answered correctly, please do ask the question again. But what we'll do now is we'll have a look at some of the resources that we have. So thank you very much, Ian. I'll take us through these next few slides. So our first step to access information will be the Skills for Wales website. We've been dropping in links in the chat, so please have a look in the chat, and if you can't find any of this information, please put it on a question. We can find links, we can share links and so on. But from there, you'll see under the Qualifications tab is a list of sectors. Click on the sector, scroll down to the bottom of the tab, and you'll see Centre, Qualification, excuse me, and Documents. Typically, you'll find two documents. One is the handbook, and secondly, the employer confirmatory sign-off. And the handbook contains content along with various requirements for the qualification. So we always advise that's a great starting point. Start with the handbook. Have a look in there. Gives you a lot of the information you're often looking for. You can find various other documents as well on the website, which cover the qualifications from foundation all the way through to the level 3. So please familiarize yourselves with those pages on the website and those documents. And again, if you're struggling with anything, please do get in touch with us. Thank you, Ian. So here we have the delivery planner. Many of you should be familiar with this form from previous webinars and from using them to support delivery on the foundation qualification. The delivery planner is fully adaptable and equally as useful for delivering these level 3 qualifications as they are for the foundation that many centres have already used them for. So please allow time to consider your delivery and timings, and if you wish to use this document, please feel free to share it with us and we can share some thoughts, maybe support and help you with that. Next slide, please, Ian. As previously promoted, we have a suite of sector books from Hodder Education. To support the new suite of qualifications, Hodder have created free mapping documents to support staff and learners in accessing the related information. So we've got some contact details a little bit later on, but if not, we can drop the contact details again in the chat. So please contact Thomas Stotter direct for more information. His email address is showing, but again, we can drop that into the chat if it's a little bit easier. Thank you. So now we'll move on to some of the next steps. So we'll commence with the approval journey, please, Ian. Thank you. So here we can see that centre approval actually commenced in January 21 with the foundation and progression, and now closely followed by the level 3 qualification. Provided you haven't already gained centre approval, the following slides will help provide a broad overview of the approval journey for centres. As we are aware, these are brand new qualifications and an offline application has to be completed. If not already done so, it is available in the Become a Centre section of the Skills for Wales website and is for all qualifications for both awarding organisations. So centres only need to complete one application. On completion, it should be forwarded to skillsforwales.quality@cityandguilds.com. This section also contains a really helpful and useful FAQ document around approval. Thank you, Ian. So centres can expect a decision on approval within 30 working days of completing the application, but please note, separate approvals must be submitted for sub-centres. So if you're working with a satellite or sub-centre, we need a separate approval. Centres do not need to invent new documentation for these qualifications. So although you may have to start adapting some of your IQA planners and adapting some of your documents to meet the new qualifications, it's not a case of creating full suite new complete documents. A lot of what you already have, a lot of your rationales for IQA and assessment, a lot of your strategies will be applied to these new qualifications as well. Thank you, Ian. So here we can see future training events we're holding. These are brand new qualifications, and we recommend you take time to register onto one of the events, especially the CPD events that we're holding over the next few months. So although they're concentrated pretty much on the foundation, many of the assessment methods are very similar, if not identical. So a lot of the little activities that we have and we work through are just equally as valuable, I'd say, across the range of new qualifications. So yeah, please have a look out for those. Try to register for them. In case of the webinars, even if you can't make it live at the time, if you register, even if you don't go on it live, a few hours later, the system will send you an update with a link to the recording. So it saves you having to get in touch. You'll be part of the follow-up and you will have a link to the recording. So we'd always recommend staff not to worry too much about the time and the date, just register anyway. And if you can't make it live, you will get those details followed on to you. So there's a range there, excuse me, just a quick note on the BSc ones. If you've got colleagues from BSc, EL are sorting those out as we speak. So you'll see new dates coming for those soon. There is a survey as well. I've dropped the links into the chat. It'll come out automatically as well at the end of this. Please do complete that survey. All the information in those are held centrally. They're shared with Qualification Wales. So if you've got any specific feedback, anything you like, you don't like, if you want more face-to-face visits, if you want more of these sessions, more webinars, if you want us to come out, what type of things do you need? All that information that you'd like to share, please put it on that survey. The more information we can get on that survey, the better. That goes centrally, and then they inform us, and it supports us if we want to do future sessions, makes us understand better your pinch points and your issues and worries about these changes. So hope you found the webinar useful so far. There's quite a lot of information in there. Please don't be overwhelmed. We're here to help, and we will try to answer as many questions as we can. So I'm just going to pause just for a moment whilst I open up the questions tab. And what I'll do is I'll share a lot of these questions around the panel of staff which we have. Just while I'm waiting for those to load up on my screen, again, I'd just like to thank all the delegates today for coming along. I know it's Friday afternoon. You're probably all hopeful and looking forward to a nice weekend, as we all are. But we are grateful. We know you're very busy in the colleges as well at this time of year. So thanks for coming along. But thanks to the panel as well, you know, Anne Harrod, we've got Jason, and particularly Ian Roberts, who's been at the heart of a lot of this development and driven a lot of the support for centres and created a lot of these presentations. So a massive thanks to Ian, along with the rest of the staff and the panel. Okay, so at the start of the presentation, said previous quals were too confusing. This new system seems to be confusing and more complicated for learners, learning providers and employers. So I suppose that's a bit of a statement. I'll probably come to Ian on a few of the other questions, but I can possibly answer that one myself. It's not meant to be more confusing. It is meant to clarify and give a comparative journey for all learners in all trade areas. So you have the foundation, progression and apprenticeship across the trade areas. So the assessment styles are the same, the project is the same, the durations are similar. They do change slightly dependent on trade, but hopefully once people get used to it, they understand it and employers understand it, it'll be much easier for them in future, as opposed to the current system where you have BRQs, MBQs, evenings, which I know in my own trade areas that there's various different qualifications often leading to the same outcome at the end. So this is an attempt to unclutter all those different routes. So I do take on board, I do agree that it can be confusing at first, and that's why we're all in it together, trying to help each other inform these changes to all providers, centres, employers, and the more of these sessions we can do and bring ourselves up to speed with things, hopefully the better. But yeah, we're hopeful and quite confident that it will be a more seamless route in future once we're used to it. So the second one, how many employers have downloaded the employer confirmation guide? I'm not sure we would naturally know that. Ian, I don't know if you can help with that question.
Yeah, to be honest, at this moment in time, because it's not actually gone live, and we don't have a record of who downloads it, what we're actually doing is holding regular events with employers. We've got one coming up on the 18th of February, which is next Friday, and that's a breakfast meeting, and I think there've over 120 employers attending, and that's through Colleague Cigar next week. We've got others as well. We're working closely with CITB. CITB are also driving this new part out there, new element of the qualification, I should say. And we've got other events as well. There's two up in the north, etc., etc. And we have our regular updates with employers. We send regular updates out to employers as well. We send them to centres. Every month we send over 180 emails out to employers, informing them of this to keep them aware and how it's working, this element's going to be built into it, and how it's going to be part of the qualification. And of course, now once we're actually starting with this, because we've just started really with the level 3 to drive the content of the qualification out, we're working closely with employers to make sure that they've got the understanding of what the qualification structure is, so they can help enhance that as well. And this morning alone, I've had 3 employers on the phone to me wanting a little bit more information. So the word is moving forward regarding, have they seen the employer confirmation guide? Yes, they have, and they've been heavily involved in developing this, moving it forward, as have other stakeholders like centres and colleges. How many's actually downloaded it? I couldn't put my hand on heart and say exact, but everybody's pushing them that way and everybody's showing them. But obviously we will know how many people have actually logged on to the Skills for Wales website and actually looked at things. But we will be sending additional questionnaires out to employers and moving it forward accordingly. But of course, we do work closely with FMB, NFB, building small businesses, and then we've got Cuffley, Apprentice, and all colleges are driving out to their employers as well, because this is part of the structure moving forward of the new qualification. Because without this employer confirmation guide, the learners will not get the CSCS card. So that's crucial. So the level 3 qualification overall grade, to say they've passed it, plus the employer confirmation guide being completed, that's what will get them the CSCS card moving forward. So I hope that answers you. I know it's a bit long-winded, but I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much, Ian. There's 2 further questions. I'll answer the first one, and I'll come to you for the second one, Ian, because it kind of follows on. So currently, we assess students in both theory and practical for individual units. Am I correct in thinking there will be no practical assessments for individual units and to be completed in the training centres, and only 3 theory assessments? Well, I suppose the first part of that is these qualifications are not assessed unitised. You may deliver them unitised, and I would say the training for these activities hasn't changed. So whatever training you were doing before to ensure that learners were suitable to progress and you give them feedback, you'll be doing your own formative assessments. So the learner will be in for a couple of months, they'll be doing practical activities. You'll want to know that their understanding and their skills are developing. So you'll have some informal assessments you run yourselves, just so you're sure as a tutor where your learners are up to. But there won't be any unitised assessments. The assessment method for these qualifications is different than the previous one. It is, for the level 3, a project. So that is how the skills are assessed. It doesn't mean that the training has changed, and to develop the learners to be able to take that assessment at the end hasn't changed. So you will still need to do all of that. Just because there's no unitised assessments doesn't mean there isn't any development training. But moving on from that, and if I can come to Ian for this one, the practical assessment that is done on site, will the student choose or employer choose what tasks are to be done?
Yeah, I mean, in the assessment pack, So what you'll do when you look at the assessment pack, there is certain criteria that they've got to meet out there in industries for bricklayers, for site carpenters, etc., plasterers and dry liners moving forward. The overall decision is depending on what that employer can provide for that learner while they're out there in industry. So in other words, they can maybe do it in two tasks, which is great, but if they can't, they can build up to a maximum of 4 tasks only. So it will be a decision made by the employer as well as the learner. So jointly they'll work together, but also in collaboration with yourselves, because it's the centre assessor that's going to be going out to actually do the assessing. So they need to be aware of what type of assessments are actually, or what tasks the learner is going to be completing. Because the learner then, once the employer and the learner and the centre come together, so they can all agree what's happening, and it's the employer mainly, because depending what that employer's got planned and scheduled for the next however many months it's there, the learner's then got to carry out the planning, then they've got to do the performing, and then they've got to do the evaluating. But they've got to keep the college informed as well, because it's working collaboratively to know when that assessor can come out from the college or training provider to actually carry out that live assessment, because it's got to be a live observation of the candidate, I should say the learner, sorry, carrying out that particular task. So it's a mixture, but it's the employer really, whatever he's got on at that moment, whether it's an extension he's building, whether he's hanging doors, he's putting some solid plaster work up, or he's dry lining, whatever it's going to be, that's how it'll be worked out accordingly. So it's working collaboratively together.
Thanks very much, Ian. Yeah, I think that's spot on. It's not really a single person's decision. There's a few variables in there, and it's dependent on a few things. So we'd advise that the centre helps with those discussions and comes up with the most appropriate assessment for that learner at that time. So I'm conscious now there's no more questions, but maybe we haven't answered them all. You know, there's quite a few. I may have missed some or may have not understood them and answered them incorrectly. If so, please do type them in again. We do have some time to try to answer them. So anything we haven't answered or another point you'd like to make, please do type them in. I've again put in the links to the survey against the last question. So if you have a look at the chat or the questions, you'll see those links. And yeah, again, please do make sure you fill those in. How does this impact the frameworks in Wales? Well, maybe I can start with that. I mean, the frameworks will be updated to include the new qualifications. So, you know, the framework will be similar, although I believe it's also, the frameworks are also under review. I'm working on some in BSc at the moment, fed back last week. So the whole framework is under review, but the qualification that is in the framework will be these new qualifications, not the previous ones. Anything else to add on that, Ian or Jason?
Yes, I can, David, to be honest. CITB have worked closely with the Welsh Government and Qualifications Wales, and they've put some frameworks together now, and that goes out for consultation on the 16th of February. So that will go out for consultation on the 16th of, I don't know what length of time you've got to look at it, review it and send it back, but that's what we've been told. So that's what will actually happen. Now, I think the biggest concern is at the moment, what they're looking at is, and I've noticed somebody's put that in, is it about the essential skills? So that's something that they're looking at and working on, whether it's going to be a level 1 or a level 2. So please don't take it as truth that it's going to be a level 2. It could vary, but we can't really, I can't confirm either way until the consultation comes back and then the final decision is made. And hopefully we should hear by the final decision by April, because obviously it's going to take a few weeks for the consultation information to come back. Then they'll collate that, and then they'll go back to the Welsh Government, and then they'll make the final agreements accordingly. So that's how we will work it out. So that's where we are at this moment. So please, if you want to gain access to the link to where the framework is or the consultation, if you contact your local CITB manager that comes out to see you, I'm sure they'll put it on to you. No problems at all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Got a couple of questions here. I've just put my camera on, so maybe you'll be able to see me. And apologies about the background. I'm doing my office up at the moment, so we're full of plasterboard here as well. There's a couple of questions, but I'll jump to the second one first, and then double back to give you a little bit of a breather. If the learner changes employer mid to late term, how will this be addressed? What incentive is available for the employer to spend the time, and what is to stop them from holding the learner up by not playing their part? I mean, potentially that's a worry, but we have those situations at the moment. We have learners on frameworks and apprenticeships at the moment. I mean, do we see that as a big issue at the moment? Employers doing that? It's, you know, in my years in education, I can't think of a time when an employer would have done that. And you know, why is that a particular worry with these new qualifications? If it's a concern and happening, it would be happening now, I suspect. I take it that there's a project on site, but there's still on-site assessment in the current qualifications. So I'm not sure. I'm hopeful that won't be a particular issue with new qualifications. So and maybe you can add anything to that, Ian. But there is a question as well, Ian, on timescale for completing the full qualification. How many years? 3 or 5?
Right. If we go back to the first question, David, that you actually mentioned, I can understand the concerns, but we've also got, and this is why we've made provision in the employee confirmation guide for more than one employer to be able to work on that particular document. So if a learner, just say for example, leaves one employer, goes to the next, the confirmation guide would follow accordingly to go with them. On the shared apprenticeship scheme, it's slightly more easier. A coupler and the apprentice, because what they have apprentices that they take and then they pass them from employer to employer. So that's why it helps on that. I know not every learner is going to have that opportunity, but at least it is there to help address that, to be able to move that forward. Regarding timescales, it's proposed that they will achieve it within the relevant 3 years. The only difficulty is that's if a learner starts in year 1. If he leaves school and he joins straight away in employment and he starts his level 3 qualification, then it's envisaged between 2 to 3 years, because we have got some qualifications like the groundworks, roof slating and tiling that may only be a 2-year program, whereas then your brickwork site, carpentry, architectural joinery will be a 3-year program. The only difference is when it'll extend is when you have a learner that's gone through the foundation and progression, and then he gets employment at the progression, sidesteps across to the level 3, whereas then he'll really only have 12 months left of that period. We have to remember the learner has got no site experience at all. So what that would mean is he would need at least 18 months or even longer to gather his work-based evidence, complete his project, and obviously the one knowledge test that he would have to they would have to complete. So that's where it could be extended. But normally it's envisaged a 3-year program in construction, between 2 to 3 years in construction. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Another question following on: learners have to do 4 practical on-site assessments. I think it's a maximum. It can be fewer if they get the range on occasions, but Ian may correct me there. There seems to be 6 practical tasks to choose from. Will any of the tasks be APL'd from the apprenticeship route? So do you mean from a level 2 to this level 3 if they've already done the level 2 apprenticeship? I suspect that may be what the question is, Ian.
No, it's right. I can probably expand on that a little bit. When they're doing the project, they'll have to do the full tasks. They can't APL, they can APL the learning, but they cannot APL any of the tasks across from a level 2 framework across to the level 3. That project is an assessment, final assessment at level 3. So whether they do it in 2, 3 or 4 activities, that's what they've got to do. They can't APL any of the activities across. What they can do is, because I'm currently putting some mapping documents together at the moment, and I'll explain a little bit more. What we're doing at the moment is we're mapping a full-time learner who does a level 2 diploma across to the level 3 qualification. And that mapping document will identify areas that they've covered and areas that they haven't. Obviously, if it's a full-time learner, they'll have done no work-based learning. That's one element of it. Excuse me. The other element of it, we're doing the level 2 framework, an MVQ level 2, sorry, not framework, an MVQ level 2. So we're mapping the MVQ level 2 also across to the new level 3 qualification. So there'll be 2 mapping documents. They'll go back to back, and we'll put them on the Skills for Wales website, and there'll be one for each trade area. What I've done at the moment is I've done it for the trowel locks or the bricklaying one at the moment. That's run that past the format and everything. I've run it past 5 colleges. They've all come back. They're highly delighted with it. You know, like they've said openly, you can always add to it and move things away, but at least it's got the majority there for you. So that's what we'll be doing to help on that. But regarding mapping for the project, nothing can be mapped to that. They've got to carry out that activity on site because it's got to be observed by the assessor. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Asking if these quals are aimed at apprentices. Yeah, the level 3 is part of the apprentice route. A question about a grant. At the moment, an employer gets a grant for the completion of the MVQ. Will there be a grant for the new qualification completion? Well, that sounds like a funding question. So I suppose it's not Sitting Gills who offer that grant as such. It will be QW, but I don't know if you've heard, Ian, if that will cross over.
I think they're referring to the CITB grants that employers get. Grants employers pick up from CITB once the learner's completed. What they're looking at, CITB at this moment in time, and we've had discussions with them, is they're looking at how the grant is actually paid at this moment in time. So they're looking at ways they can do that, and also ways of encouraging employers to complete the confirmation guide. As we know, it's an extra task that employers have got to do, is employer confirmation guide, but they're looking at ways that the grant is going to be paid out moving forward. And this will follow once the review has been carried out and the feedback's been received on the framework. All right, so you'll wait for more information to come out, but there'll be grants available, but how they're dispersing it could be slightly different to what they're getting at the moment. That's how they're looking at it. But like David says, there's nothing from City and Guilds, even we don't get grants. So there'll be nothing from City and Guilds. But obviously the funding, but I do believe he means the grants from CITB, David. That's what they're doing at the moment anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question, so what's the route for 2s to 3s for learners who don't have employment? Well, under the current new structure from Qualification Wales, there are no VRQs or diplomas at level 3. The current level 3 qualification is aimed at the apprentices. So at the moment, they can do a level 3 diploma and progress to HE. Yeah, as I said, we have diplomas in various sectors, but that doesn't mean they will be funded by QW. All I can say, is that the new routes, if you've seen the new routes, they're on the documents we've spoke about. You've got a foundation at level 2, a progression at level 2, and then the level 3 apprenticeship programme. They are the new funded routes in Wales as of September. So I suppose if learners were looking at HE, there is a national certificate level 3, or there certainly was just a couple of years ago. I imagine that's still available, not from ourselves, but those qualifications still exist, so learners may want to choose that as a route. But all I can say is, again, there's no level 3 VRQs in the new routes. I would suggest that, if you don't feel as though some of those routes are appropriate, use the survey to show those thoughts, put those thoughts down on the survey. So, how are we doing for time? Ian normally keeps me on track on time.
We've just got 10 minutes left, David. We've 10 minutes left, so if we've no further questions, you may just go to the last couple of slides and then come back to any questions. I'll leave it with you, David.
I think that's correct. If we can move on to the next couple of slides then, please, Ian, and then we'll just double back to check there's no final questions, and then we can close after those. So my mouse has decided to stop working. I've been pushing this all the way through the webinar, haven't I? And I've just mentioned it again. The feedback really does help. So we're going to be sending an email out following this, asking for your feedback. That is feedback on these webinars. How useful do you find them? Are we answering your questions? May not always be the answers you're looking for. We understand that. But hopefully we are here explaining things and answering them for you. We've got then the survey where you can put those thoughts down. Is the format webinars face-to-face? Do you want a blend of them both? What support do you need in future? What are your thoughts on the changes? You know, just share and answer as deeply and honestly as you can, please. We do appreciate your feedback. If the things that we've done well and you like this format, we've been able to answer it, please put down positives as well, and then we can have a balance. And I think there's just one more slide left, Ian. So this next slide gives us 2 email addresses. So we spoke about contacting us through the survey, but 2 really helpful and useful email addresses there, or one email address, skillsforwales.customer@sittingills.com. If you go away in a couple of hours, you think, oh crikey, I wish I'd requested that, or I can't find this information, or I don't agree with this, please do contact skillsforwales.customer@sittingills.com. Any thoughts, any queries, please email, put them down on there. We really appreciate, we'd rather have those questions come in so we're able to adapt and to answer them. Again, it's not always easy to answer them because it may not be the response you were hoping for, but it's better that we actually give that response and then you know the answer to those. So there are some more questions coming by the looks of it. I'll just open that up in a moment, but just for a final time, in case I forget to do so, thanks everyone for attending, and thank you very much to the panel and Harrod, Jason and Ian for their input. I hope you've all found it helpful. We always have a number of mature tradespeople who want to do MVQs. What will happen to them? I believe the MVQs will still be available for mature learners. So that route for mature learners outside of apprenticeships, the MVQs will still be available. Ian, can you add anything to that?
No, you're right, David. As NVQs are continuing, especially for the OSAT route. So, but obviously, with this funding attached to it, that's not our decision, I'm afraid. That's for the relevant people to do. But yeah, OSAT will definitely be continuing, especially for the experienced workers. So NVQs will be there. I don't think they're going to be funded. Thank you.
Okay, last shout out for any questions whatsoever or any feedback, because we will close now. It doesn't mean this is your last opportunity. There will be more opportunities to contact us. Please stay in touch, and all the best of luck with these changes. And thank you very much. Have a great weekend, and we hope to see you all soon.